The acrid smell of charred wood still hung heavily in the air as emergency responders sifted through the remnants of what used to be a bustling Los Angeles neighborhood, now reduced to ashes. 10-year-old Emily sat on the curb, her knees drawn tightly to her chest. In her small arms, she clutched a singed teddy bear, the only thing left of a life that once overflowed with warmth and laughter. Smoke rose in gray-black plumes against the sky, while ash fell like mournful tears from the heavy, clouded heavens. A cold wind snaked through the gutted remains of homes, carrying with it the haunting scent of destruction, a bitter reminder that everything here had been lost. Emily's tear-streaked face bore the smudges of soot, her red, swollen eyes fixed blankly on the rubble in front of her. Her thoughts drifted to the little home she had once shared with her family. She could still see the cozy living room where they would gather on cold winter evenings. The fireplace had always crackled with life, its warm glow dancing across the walls. Her younger brother's laughter would ring out as their mother spun stories of enchanted lands, their father seated in his favorite armchair, his rough hands gently tousling their hair. It was all so vivid in her mind. Every detail, every sound, every feeling of safety. Now all of it was gone, consumed by the unforgiving flames that had taken everything she held dear. Around her, reporters buzzed like bees, cameras clicking as they captured the heartbreaking scene. But no lens could truly capture the depth of Emily's sorrow. Then a murmur rippled through the crowd. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Barron Trump, son of former President Donald Trump, had just landed in Los Angeles and was on his way here. No one knew why he had chosen this devastated neighborhood as his destination, but all eyes turned toward the street, wondering what could possibly happen next. The sleek black SUV came to a stop at the curb, drawing the curious eyes of onlookers. Secret Service agents stepped out first, their sharp gazes scanning the area, assessing every possible threat. Inside the car, Barron sat still, his hands resting tightly on his knees. There was a hint of hesitation in his eyes, even though his face remained composed. He couldn't help but wonder if his presence here would truly make a difference. Was this just a futile gesture in the face of such overwhelming loss? But then, through the tinted window, he saw her. Emily. She sat quietly on the sidewalk, a small, fragile figure amidst the devastation. In that moment, Barron knew he couldn't just sit idly by. "Are you going to do nothing, Barron?" He could hear his mother's voice from one of their rare conversations echoing in his mind. "If you have the ability to help someone, then you should. Kindness isn't just a feeling, it's an action." Those words resonated deeply as he opened the car door and stepped out. Every step he took felt deliberate, each one carrying the weight of his decision. He knew the crowd was watching him, that the cameras were capturing his every move. But he didn't care. Right now, all he wanted was to give Emily something, anything to help her feel less alone. Barron walked slowly toward her, his expression soft and empathetic. The murmur of the crowd faded as they watched him approach. Even though he could feel the lenses of countless cameras pointed at him, none of that mattered. At this moment, all he cared about was the small girl sitting in front of him, lost in her grief, and his hope that he could make even a tiny difference in her world. "I'm Barron. I heard about what happened. Can I sit with you?" Emily blinked up at him, her small world shifting in an instant. Barron lowered himself onto the curb beside Emily. He said nothing at first, simply sitting in the silence that clung to the destroyed neighborhood. Emily didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the ashes at her feet. The journalists, silenced by the moment, kept their distance. Their lenses zoomed in, but their voices quiet. A few Secret Service agents lingered nearby, their eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Barron took a deep breath and looked at the charred teddy bear in Emily's hands. "That looks really special," he said, breaking the silence. Emily nodded, her grip tightening. "It's all I have left." His face softened and he nodded as if he understood. "When I was younger, I had a stuffed tiger. He was my best friend," he said. "I called him Stripey. I'd talk to him when I felt sad." For the first time since the tragedy, Emily looked up at him. There was something in his voice, a kind of kindness and understanding, that cut through the haze of her grief. "Stripey," she whispered, a tiny smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Barron grinned. Not my most creative moment, but he made me feel safe. The air was still thick with grief, but Emily's small smile had sparked something in the crowd. Barron leaned closer, speaking softly. Do you mind if I tell you a little secret? Emily shook her head. When bad things happen, it's easy to feel alone, he said. But you're not alone, Emily. A lot of people care about you. I care about you. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't only tears of sadness. Barron reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white handkerchief. He handed it to her. I can't bring back what you lost, he said, his voice breaking slightly. But maybe I can help make things a little brighter. Emily stared at the handkerchief, then at Barron. Slowly she reached out and took it. Thank you, she murmured. Before anyone could react, Barron stood and walked back to his SUV. The press buzzed, unsure of what had just happened. As the car drove away, Emily clutched the handkerchief to her chest. For the first time since the fire, she felt a flicker of hope. As the SUV drove away, Barron sat quietly, staring out the window. His heart felt heavy. The image of Emily's tear-streaked face clung to his mind. He turned to one of the Secret Service agents beside him. Can you get me the contact information for someone in charge of disaster relief here? He asked. The agent blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Yes, sir. May I ask why? Barron's gaze didn't waver. I'm not leaving this city until I figure out how to help her. A few hours later, Barron was sitting in a modest office at a local disaster relief center. Around him, volunteers sorted supplies and filled out forms. The director, a kind-looking woman named Ms. Harper, sat across from him, listening intently. She's lost everything, Barron said, his voice firm. I want to make sure she has a future. Can you help me set up something for her? Ms. Harper looked at him in astonishment. Mr. Trump, this is highly unusual. Are you sure about this? He nodded. I'm not doing this for attention. That little girl deserves more than ashes. Ms. Harper's eyes softened. We'll help you. The next morning, Emily woke up in a temporary shelter, surrounded by other families affected by the wildfire. She had barely slept. The small white handkerchief Barron had given her sat under her pillow, her only source of comfort. A knock at the door startled her. A shelter volunteer smiled as she stepped inside. Emily, someone's here to see you. Emily's heart raced. She followed the volunteer into a small meeting room where Barron stood waiting, holding a carefully wrapped package. His Secret Service guard stood discreetly in the background, giving the moment a sense of gravity. Hi, Emily, he said warmly. I wanted to see you again. Emily's eyes widened as Barron handed her the package. What is it? She whispered. Open it, he encouraged. With trembling hands, Emily unwrapped the gift. Inside was a brand new teddy bear, soft and fluffy, with a tag that read, You are loved. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged the bear tightly. Thank you, she choked out. Barron knelt beside her. This is just the beginning, Emily. I promise. Things are going to get better. News of Barron's visit to Emily had already begun spreading, but when pictures of him handing her the teddy bear surfaced, the story went viral. Social media lit up with posts about his kindness, and Not Her Barron Helps trended worldwide. Barron, however, remained focused. He didn't care about the attention. What mattered was keeping his promise to Emily. Back at his hotel room, he called Ms. Harper. I want to set up a scholarship fund for Emily, he said. And not just for her, any child affected by the wildfire. Can we do that? Ms. Harper was stunned. That's incredible, Mr. Trump, but it's a huge commitment. Barron didn't hesitate. Then let's make it happen. When Barron Trump proposed creating the Phoenix Fund to support wildfire victims, not everyone was on board. During a meeting with potential donors and local officials, skeptical glances were exchanged around the room. Some were blunt in their doubts, openly questioning the feasibility of his ambitious plan. A long-term support fund? Do you have any idea how much it will cost to sustain something like that? One donor asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Even if it gets off the ground, how can you guarantee it won't collapse within months? The questions hung heavy in the air, casting a tense shadow over the room. But Barron stood firm. He met their doubtful gazes head-on and spoke with calm determination. If no one else believes in this, I'll start it myself. This isn't about me. It's about kids like Emily. If I can change even one child's life, then every effort is worth it. The room fell silent. One by one, the skeptical looks softened. There was something in Barron's unwavering resolve that began to shift their doubts. Meanwhile, Emily sat with her new teddy bear, unaware of the plans being made. For the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. She wasn't alone. Someone cared enough to fight for her future. But the question lingered. What more would Barron do to help Emily rebuild her life? Emily sat in the shelter's common area, clutching the teddy bear Barron had given her. She couldn't stop thinking about his kindness, the way he had looked at her, spoken to her. It wasn't like anyone else. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there for her. One of the volunteers noticed her deep in thought. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded. "Do you have a pen and paper?" The volunteer smiled and handed her what she needed. Emily began writing a letter. Her handwriting was shaky, but the words poured from her heart. "Dear Barron, thank you for caring about me when I thought no one did. You made me feel like I mattered. I don't know how to repay you, but I promise I'll never forget what you've done for me. Love, Emily." Later, she gave the letter to the shelter coordinator, who promised to deliver it. That night, Emily hugged her teddy bear and whispered, "I hope he knows how much he's helped me." Miles away, Barron sat in his hotel room when an agent handed him the letter. He read it twice, his heart swelling with emotion. "She doesn't have to repay me," he said softly. "I just want her to have a chance." The following day, Barron met with Ms. Harper and a team of experts to finalize the scholarship fund. They worked tirelessly, creating a program to help children affected by the wildfire. "We'll call it the Phoenix Fund," Barron suggested, "because it's about rising from the ashes." Word spread quickly, and donations began pouring in from around the world. The long-awaited grand opening of the Phoenix Center finally arrived. Families, volunteers, and donors gathered in anticipation, eager to see the culmination of their hard work. But just hours before the ceremony, the sky darkened, and a sudden storm rolled in. Heavy rain and fierce winds swept through, wreaking havoc on the outdoor setup. Posters, decorations, and even the sound system were damaged beyond repair. Volunteers scrambled to salvage what they could, but the chaos was overwhelming. Many began to worry that the event might need to be canceled. A member of the planning team approached Barron, their face lined with concern. "What should we do? Should we postpone the ceremony?" Barron paused for a moment before nodding decisively. "This isn't about the stage or appearances. We'll hold the ceremony right here, in the community room at the center. That's what Phoenix is all about, rising from adversity." The small community room was quickly cleaned and rearranged. It wasn't glamorous. There were no bright lights or booming speakers, but the atmosphere was warm and intimate, filled with the quiet determination of everyone involved. When Barron stood to speak, he opened with a gentle smile. "Today we've learned an important lesson. Not everything goes as planned, but that's okay. What matters is that we're here together, making something meaningful." The room erupted into applause and smiles as everyone felt the depth of his words. In that moment, they understood. Like the Phoenix Center itself, they could overcome challenges and rebuild, no matter how daunting. Celebrities, philanthropists, and ordinary people were inspired by Barron's actions. They wanted to be part of something meaningful. Meanwhile, Emily received surprising news. Emily, the shelter coordinator, said, "Barron has arranged for you to meet some very special people today." Emily's eyes widened as she was driven to a new home, one donated by an anonymous benefactor. Standing in front of it was Barron, smiling warmly. "This is for you," he said. "It's not just a house, it's a fresh start." Emily burst into tears. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Barron replied. "Just promise me you'll make it a happy home." As Emily stepped into her new home, she marveled at how everything felt so warm and inviting. Barron had thought of every detail, from a cozy bedroom for her to a small garden where she could plant flowers. "Do you like it?" he asked. Emily nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. She turned to Barron and said the only words that came to mind. "You're my hero." Barron knelt to her level. "I'm not a hero, Emily. I'm just someone who cares. And you're the brave one for going through all this. Before leaving, Barron placed a small candle on the kitchen counter. This is for you, he said. Light it whenever you feel scared or lonely. It'll remind you that there's always hope. As the sun set that evening, Emily lit the candle and sat by the window, her teddy bear in her arms. For the first time in days, she smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. Barron watched from afar, his heart full. But he knew his work wasn't over. There were more children like Emily who needed help, and he was determined to make a difference. The story of Barron and Emily was now everywhere. News outlets, social media, and even talk shows buzzed with discussions about Barron's compassion in the Phoenix Fund. Donations surged beyond what anyone had anticipated, allowing the fund to expand its reach. Back at the shelter, other children who had lost their homes began receiving aid as well. New backpacks, school supplies, and even small toys were distributed. Emily, now living in her donated home, visited the shelter to thank the volunteers. I want to help too, she told them. The volunteers smiled. You already are, Emily. Your story is inspiring so many people. Barron watched the updates from a quiet corner of the relief center. He didn't seek attention, preferring to let the fund's work speak for itself. But when a little boy tugged on his sleeve and said, "Thank you for helping us," he couldn't hold back his emotions. The ripple effect of kindness was spreading far and wide. But Barron still had one more surprise for Emily, one he hoped would give her strength for the future. Barron returned to Emily's new home one afternoon, carrying a large wrapped box. Emily greeted him at the door, her smile brighter than he'd ever seen it. I have something special for you, he said, handing her the gift. Emily tore the wrapping paper, revealing a photo album. Her eyes widened as she flipped through its pages. Inside were pictures of her family, photos that had been salvaged and restored by a professional team Barron had hired. We found these in the rubble, Barron explained gently. I thought you might want to keep these memories close. Emily's hands trembled as she stared at a picture of her family on a picnic, her little brother laughing with a popsicle in his hand. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of gratitude. How did you do this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Barron smiled. Sometimes the smallest things can mean the most. Emily hugged the album tightly, her heart full of both sadness and joy. For the first time since the fire, she felt like her family was with her again. Barron's next visit to Emily wasn't just personal. It was part of something bigger. He had arranged a small gathering at the new community center where families affected by the wildfire could come together for support. Emily was invited to speak, a request that made her nervous. What if I mess up? She asked Barron before stepping on stage. You won't, he assured her. Just speak from your heart. Standing before a crowd of survivors, volunteers, and donors, Emily clutched her teddy bear for comfort. I thought I lost everything in the fire, she began, her voice shaking. But then someone showed me that even when things seem hopeless, there's still kindness in the world. That someone is Barron. The crowd erupted in applause. Barron, standing at the back, felt his face flush with humility. Emily continued, if you ever feel like you can't go on, just remember that there are people who care. People who want to help you rise from the ashes, like a phoenix. Her words touched everyone in the room, but the question lingered. What else could Barron do to keep this hope alive? After Emily's emotional speech, Barron felt a sense of renewed purpose. The Phoenix Fund was already helping countless families, but he wanted to ensure its impact would last for generations. Late that evening, Barron met with his advisors and Ms. Harper. We need to make this bigger, he said. I want to create a space where children like Emily can heal and dream again. What do you have in mind? Ms. Harper asked. A center, Barron replied, his voice firm. A place where kids can learn, play, and find hope. We'll call it the Phoenix Center. Plans were drawn up overnight, and Barron personally approved every detail, from art therapy programs to mentorship opportunities for young survivors. Meanwhile, Emily had no idea that she was about to play a key role in the Phoenix Center's launch. A few weeks later, Emily was invited to what she thought was a community event. As she arrived, she was astonished to see a large building with a gleaming sign, the Phoenix Center. Barron stood at the entrance, waiting for her with a warm smile. This is for you, he said. gesturing to the crowd of families and children gathered behind him. And for everyone who needs a second chance. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked around. Inside the center were classrooms, a library, and even a room dedicated to creative arts. The walls were adorned with drawings from children who had begun to heal after the wildfire. "This is amazing," Emily whispered. "You did all this?" "We did," Barron corrected her. "This is your story, Emily. You've inspired so many people." As she explored the center, Emily felt a wave of pride. For the first time, she realized that her pain had been transformed into something beautiful. A week after the grand opening, Barron received an unexpected letter. It was from Emily's late mother's best friend, who had been following the story from afar. In the letter she wrote, "Barron, I don't know if you'll ever understand the depth of what you've done. Emily's parents would be so proud to see the light you brought into her life. Thank you for reminding the world that kindness can change everything." Barron sat in silence after reading it, the weight of the words settling over him. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. That evening, he visited Emily again. She greeted him with a smile and handed him something, a drawing she had made of her family and Barron standing together under a bright blue sky. "It's for you," she said shyly. Barron looked at the drawing, his throat tightening. "This is perfect," he said. "Thank you, Emily." As he walked away, Barron knew he had done something that would outlast him. Emily's story and the kindness it inspired had become a beacon of hope for the world. Months after the Phoenix Center's grand opening, it had become a sanctuary for wildfire survivors. Children laughed in the playground, parents shared stories of hope, and the walls were filled with artwork that symbolized recovery. Emily spent much of her time at the center. She had joined an art therapy group where she discovered a love for painting. One day, Barron surprised her during a session, watching as she carefully worked on a canvas. "What are you painting?" he asked. Emily looked up smiling. "A phoenix." The painting showed a magnificent bird rising from a bed of ashes, its wings glowing with vibrant colors. Barron was stunned by the detail and emotion in her work. "This is incredible, Emily," he said. "You've captured what this place is all about." Her cheeks flushed with pride. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Barron replied. "This deserves to be seen by everyone." Little did Emily know, her painting would soon become the official emblem of the Phoenix Fund, representing resilience and hope for families around the world. The Phoenix Fund had grown beyond Barron's initial vision. Its success inspired similar initiatives in other countries, helping families affected by natural disasters rebuild their lives. Emily's story became the heart of the movement. Her painting, now displayed on billboards and websites, was a symbol of what the fund stood for. Barron made sure Emily knew how much she had contributed. One day, Barron invited Emily to a televised event to celebrate the fund's achievements. Standing on stage, he addressed the audience. "This all began with one little girl who showed me what courage looks like," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "Emily reminded me that even in the darkest times, a spark of hope can ignite a brighter future." The audience erupted in applause as Emily was invited on stage. Holding Barron's hand, she shyly waved to the crowd, her heart full of gratitude. Behind the scenes, Barron's team was already planning to expand the Phoenix Fund into education programs, disaster prevention workshops, and more. The movement had taken on a life of its own, driven by a simple act of kindness. On the one-year anniversary of the wildfire, Emily and Barron visited the spot where her home once stood. The charred remains had been cleared, replaced by a small memorial garden. Emily placed flowers at the base of a plaque that read, "In memory of lives lost and in honor of resilience found." Standing beside her, Barron said softly, "You've come so far, Emily. Your parents would be proud." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." Barron knelt to her level, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than you realize. Your strength has inspired so many people, including me." As they walked away from the garden, Emily asked, "Do you think the Phoenix Fund will keep helping people forever?" Barron smiled. "As long as there are people like you in the world, I think it will." That evening, Emily lit the small candle Barron had given her months ago. Its soft glow filled her room, a symbol of the hope and love that had rebuilt her life. Barron, watching the news coverage of the anniversary from his hotel, felt a sense of peace. He knew the work wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to reflect on what they had achieved. The Phoenix Fund wasn't just a legacy for him. It was a promise to the world that kindness and compassion could truly transform lives. Emily's story is not just about a young girl overcoming loss. It's a powerful reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can illuminate the darkest places. As Barron said in his speech, we can't change the past, but we can build a brighter future if we act from the heart. What about you? How did this story make you feel? Have you ever witnessed or done something kind that changed someone's life? Share your story in the comments below, because your story might just inspire someone else. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button to let us know you enjoy meaningful content like this. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our future heartfelt stories. And most importantly, share this video with your friends and loved ones, because even a small act of sharing can spread kindness to millions. Let's work together to spread this message. Kindness is the light that guides us, even on the darkest days. Thank you for being here and for helping us build a better, kinder world.